He was a monster. They were mesmerized. She was a titan. These are the sorts of metaphors we use all the time in literature. Open any piece of fiction and you'll see a phrase like this within the first couple of pages. In games, though, this can also be literal. Before we begin, please welcome Jack McGee, who's doing guest art for this episode. Thanks, Jack. This whole episode is going to be about the fact that in games, something can be metaphorical and literal at the same time. This is important because so often, we the community, whether it be the players or critics, miss the metaphorical and only see the literal, denying us a richer experience and hamstringing what developers can actually deliver. At the same time, the development community often forgets to think about the metaphors the literal elements of their games deliver, robbing their audience of the depth they crave. But before we can solve this, we should probably give a few examples to make sure we're all on the same pages. Imagine a character in a game that's a vampire. Well, the fact that they are a vampire, of course, means they are a vampire, but that's not all it means. What are the characteristics usually associated with a vampire? They're parasitic, blood-sucking, and predatory. In a piece of literature, if you said, "That man is a vampire," often it's those qualities, not the fact that the person you're talking about is a literal vampire, that you'd be expressing. And everyone would know exactly what you meant. But in games, the fact that the character is a vampire also means they represent those qualities. If our vampire is secretly the head of the local merchant guild, we're using the metaphor inherent in the fact that they are a vampire to make a commentary. We're saying that these merchants are vampires, at least in the metaphorical sense. They're blood-sucking or leeches. If you were to swap things around a bit and have the vampire fighting against the local merchant guild, with the peasants supporting and hiding them, you're now making a slightly higher level commentary. You're basically saying, even the vampire is less vampiric than these folks. Now let's take a few more complex examples from film and comics. Superman's Fortress of Solitude, for example, is an actual fortress, but it's also representational. It's actually more important as a metaphor for the inner life of the character who possesses it than its capacity as a physical defensive structure. Simply by Superman having a Fortress of Solitude somewhere in the Arctic, we can instantly come to know a lot more about him as a character. No extra text space has to be taken up trying to tell us about Superman's inner life to give us this. And because of it, we don't need any excruciating dialogue hitting us over the head with the fact that the strongest person in the world is also vulnerable and alone. In the Alien films, the aliens are face-hugging, chest-bursting parasites. They also happen to be what the Earthbound megacorps strive for. Most of the films revolve around, and most of the problems in the film are caused by, agents of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, trying to acquire and use these destructive, monstrous creatures. The nature of the creatures is used as a metaphor that tells us about the corporate greed in this dystopic sci-fi future. Silent Hill 2 always stands out as the best example of this idea in games, utilizing the fact that, in games, the literal and the metaphorical can overlap. For instance, the killer mannequins that are just 4 pairs of legs are absolutely a representation of the main character's frustrated sexual desires, but they're also really killer mannequins who are out to murder you. In the Yakuza series, Kiryu literally has a tattoo of a dragon on his back, but symbolically, the dragon in Japanese culture represents wisdom and protection. It represents being a guardian. Meanwhile, Nishiki literally has a tattoo of a koi on his back, but that koi also tells us about his character. The koi is a symbol of striving. In the myth, the koi can become a dragon, but only if it doesn't give up, if it continues to fight the current rather than choose the easy route and go with the flow of water. In the end, this tattoo tells us what Nishiki could be, and foreshadows what he will become. If we think past the literal in our games, and think to what those literal elements might represent, we can convey so much meaning that we'd never be able to fit in if we had to cram it into the text of the game. It also gives us the option to deliver information in a subtler way, without the laborious character expositions that make so many games drag or feel cheesy. Now, how to achieve this on a development side isn't actually that hard. It just involves forethought. It involves knowing your characters or what you're trying to say with a particular part of your game early enough in development that you can create assets around those ideas. And, in truth, this is probably just good practice. We should generally think through our characters and the things we're trying to say with our games earlier in cycle. Sure, some of it will get cut and changed as the game goes on, but you know what? That's no real loss. You'll still build better characters, and you'll still get neat character designs, enemies, locations, or narrative arcs out of doing so. The other approach is a little looser, but it's probably where we'll have to start in modern development. Every time we're about to start sculpting a model or designing an enemy, we should ask ourselves, why? Why is it this particular thing instead of something else? What does its nature or its design say? That costs us nothing and provides more depth to our games. And if you don't think players will dig to that depth, if you don't think that they'll think about it to that level, oh, do I have a wiki for Silent Hill or Bloodborne I'd like to show you. If it's there, your players will find it. And on the other side, as a community, as players and as critics, we should give developers the benefit of the doubt. We should assume there's meaning there. That's not reading too much into things, and it won't in any way spoil your games. Because even if it's not the designer's intent, by doing that, maybe from time to time, you'll find something in a game you might have otherwise overlooked that will be truly meaningful to you. And if any of you watching this have any other good examples of places where the literal and the metaphorical overlap in games, put them in the comments section below. We love getting those types of discussions started. Until then, see you next time.